Okay, believe it or not, it's time for another episode of Ask
Mom
and Dad. I'm Dad, and this is
Mom.
I know it. Well, hey, we're laughing.
It's not so funny anymore. Is that what you're saying? Like the mix-up of genders and all that silliness?
I wasn't confused. I'm clearly Dad, and that makes it real simple and straightforward. So I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you should turn that light on behind us so I can see
so
what
you can see that you're Dad.
Yeah, I can see my genderness.
Okay.
Yeah, well, things are what they are. So,
upside down.
Yeah, well, we're back again, and I would like to say it's in the same month, but it's not because the day changed, but it's within the same few weeks, so that's good. I'll take that. We're trying to get back in the groove of things, and so we're so glad you've been eagerly waiting. We hope we haven't caused any undue anxiety, and boy, are you writing a book over there? What's going on?
No, go ahead.
I'm out of things to say. I need dialogue. You have to talk to me now. We're here doing the thing.
Well, we got some fun news from our son, so it's a little distracting. So, speaking of sons, that's what we're going to be talking about, right?
Oh, we got another son coming? Yeah, speaking of sons.
These,
it's all right.
Jacob and Esau.
These people clearly
is that what you wanted to talk about a little bit
Oh,
today?
yeah. Speaking of sons, not necessarily our sons, just sons' sons. I see what you mean there. I was reading the other day in Genesis, and it occurred to me that the Bible is full of some of the worst examples of parenting on planet Earth. And I thought, well, maybe that now I'm not saying that to say that that the Bible isn't a place where you can find good examples of parenting. It just seems more often than not we're doing the question of what is not the way to do something versus what is the way to do something.
Yeah.
And so I was reading about
well, the truth of
Esau and Jacob. Go ahead.
Yeah, Jacob and Esau. The truth of it is that they're
Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob.
They
and
were
Esau.
starting to learn about God's ways, right? And so there still was a lot of just. It sounds to me like maybe pagan practices as well as just cultural practices that came into to bear on their lives. So the Bible's very honest, right? In that sense, it wants us to know that people were dealing with the similar things that we deal with today, but
right.
But he also wants us to see that wasn't ultimately his best for them, or I think. But at the same time, it's true. It's true to real life. It's true to human.
I think, yeah.
existence.
For me, it's more a matter of the Bible is telling truth, so it's not trying to tell. Yeah, you said real life.
And I said honest.
And honest, too.
In the sense that God wants us to know, like you said, what's really going on. Yeah, is that what you mean?
Well, and what I'm saying by that is it's not trying to create a book of
like flowery
trying to make
perfection
things
or
look like
something.
it's not.
Right.
Because it's trying to be truthful. And the story is not so much a story of
It's not trying to be truthful. It is truthful.
well, it's a story about the people, but in the context of a broken world.
Right.
And broken people and a redeeming God trying to setting the groundwork for restoring them. So it's not trying to put a shine on them. I don't know what the word is. I'm trying to think make them look better than they are. It's just this is what they did.
Yeah, it's honest, real reality of humanity. That's what I mean. It's God trying to help us see Him revealing Himself to a people who are broken, to a world that has gone away from Him, right?
Right.
And calling them back to Himself is a process. Not perfect.
Sure. And so that there's a when we talk about favoritism, for example, it's not the first time we see it. We see it in Abraham has this really young son that Joseph, who's is that right? No, that's down the road.
Yeah,
coming
that would
up.
be down the road. Abraham has Ishmael first and ends up needing to reject him.
And he's forced to reject him. And then you've got this story and. Yeah, then you get down to Jacob, who chooses favorites as well, and I got there.
Yeah.
It took me a second. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. We got to run through those founding fathers, and then when we're not speaking about perfection, I clearly am not perfect in how I get my genealogies in order.
Well, it's different to me. It's different in this story a little bit because we're talking about twins, so they're born at the same time to the same mother, which we know later on with the Jacob story. It's Rachel that he loved first, and so his two sons that were born from her are kind of special in his eyes. That one's a little bit more clear. Like it makes a little more sense maybe to what we understand. This one's confusing because it sounds like immediately these twins are quite a bit different at birth, and mom's chosen one and dad's chosen one. That's kind of how you get the impression. I feel like to some degree it just sounds a little bit more like Jacob had a little bit more feminine qualities and enjoyed being in the home doing like cooking food and doing some stuff like that. So probably got to know mom a little bit better and closer. And then here's wild hair Esau, who runs out and likes the wild, and his dad loves the game that he brings in. And so yeah, it just seems like they kind of more I don't understand exactly how they chose them. I think it just kind of may have gravitated toward that way. Also, Esau was a man's man. He was
Jacob
the
would be
guy.
like in marketing today. He'd be like, computers and marketing. And
he'd be the one.
Then you've got
pulling the
Esau, who's the MMA fighter, and that's his hobby on the weekend. And but also was probably he doesn't have the self-control to be a military commander, because that's like the best of all.
Right.
Not a Navy SEAL, just probably got in a lot of fights with things. Well, that's
Yep.
Jacob had to run, or felt that he needed to run for his life, because he pulled
Esau was tough.
Brother over his eyes. I guess maybe real quickly, we should review that story a little bit and what it's about. Why don't you tell us the story? Let's see. So it's found in Genesis.
So Rebecca and Isaac, they had kind of an interesting matchup, and basically
they were sent,
arranged marriage,
and that was
right?
common.
Yeah.
The same thing happened prior to that with Abraham and
Sarah.
Sarah, no,
you're still thinking
golly,
forward to Jacob and Rachel.
Jacob and Rachel's next. Yes,
okay,
because I'm reading that right now, day to day. So I'm kind of like I'm too. I did this a week ago.
Yeah, future. So the practice of that day was to pick someone who was related but a distant related, right? I mean, someone that was from their father's line of family, so they would sometimes go and travel and find a relative. In fact, God had told them
find someone
to marry
they trusted.
among,
That was someone within a similar clan, or someone that was that they could.
They were supposed to stay within their known relative situation. I mean, back then it was purer than we're thinking of it now, but they couldn't. They shouldn't marry outside their belief system was the biggest thing. So a lot of times they would go back to their family, right? So that's where Rebecca came from, right? Was from the line of Abraham as well.
Down the road.
Laban's daughter.
And so all that to say
what
thank
were
you
you
for your
talking
patience
about
while you're working with
the other day? You said that it was interesting that the arranged marriages and the things like that would have been, today we think it would be awesome if we could do that, if we could kind of project this family believes the way we do, they're raising their kids the way we do, let's just put them together and find out if they, are ready to be married. When they're ready to be married, let's just let them be married, because it's kind of a safety net for them. So back then, it was just
that's
how
what
they
he's
did
doing in
that,
the story.
right?
He's making sure that his son is not marrying from within the pagan culture that he's in, that does not share their connection to God.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that we as parents today should bear in mind too. But we don't have to, in our culture where we don't quote unquote arrange marriages, still can pull it off, and to a large degree we do. I mean, that we try to do that. We try to do that in our cultures anyway. Mm-hmm. People, having them in places together, where the people that they meet, what they're exposed to, is where they're going to find it. People who go off into the world and look in all sorts of strange places. That Proverbs refers to the strange woman. Anything that's strange or unfamiliar is what it's using strange in a sense of
an unequal is another way it's put in the New Testament.
An unknown. Anytime you're making a lifelong decision on an unknown, the risk goes through the roof.
Right. I need to clarify, not unequal as in status, but unequal as in belief systems and the way they're raised and an understanding of the gospel.
I always think of a friend of ours in our church back in Arizona, the Lauras, Jose and Leslie, because they knew each other since they were 3 years old, and they were playmates growing up, and their parents, their family was just so tight that they grew up knowing one another and eventually married and had a
they
family.
were kind of promised, I think, at age 15.
They
and
like
didn't
were,
get married till
it
they
was a
were
planned marriage
19
without
or
being a
20,
planned
yeah.
marriage. That's how they tell the story, and they're just a wonderful couple, and it's just kind
very
of
faithful and produced
and so
wonderful kids.
Yeah, it's not like they were told to marry each other. It was just kind of a they were each other's best friends coming up, and it just became that way. So I think you can create this circumstances even in today's culture where you can have some lack of a better word, controls. Put some controls in place, some boundaries in place that allow for that's because that's what he does here. He says, "Here's what you need to find for my son."
And like we're going to talk about, it's not as if you try to control your children, but it is the promotion of the right things to them. That's what I think is important. Like what you believe, they need to know, and they need to know that the convictions of that are so important that it should sort of trump everything else in their lives as far as decision making,
right?
For especially for the bigger decisions, that should be guiding them. That should be the guiding force that they cling to. And we've talked about foundational principles. If your home is banked on the Word of God, not necessarily on what's your church teaches or the right, good things over here, or I don't know. It's very important to me to go back to what the Word says, which is very, it's straightforward in several things. I was thinking about that today. Our society goes so far away from God's principles that we can't even go back to the 10 Commandments, which are very simplified versions of what God sees as best for us. Don't commit adultery. Now, if you think about the word adultery, covers so much from so many angles. It's the sexual expression outside of marriage. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it in that way, and outside of the marriage that God ordained, so between a man and a woman. So everything else outside of that fits into that category and would be listed under there. So even if you're just teaching your kids basic 10 Commandments, they've got some parameters that give them a wise base to go from.
Whenever you give your kids your life boundaries are important in life. There's just simple boundaries that are natural. You don't touch the stove when it's hot. That's a boundary. If you touch the stove and it's hot, it's not going to go well for you. Same thing is true in these things. If you step outside of your relationship, your marriage, it's not going to go well for you. You may not realize the consequences as quickly as a hot stove, but Proverbs 6 talks about the jealousy of an enraged man when he finds out that his wife's been stepping out on him with another man. It's going to come down on the other man.
Well, and I'm saying God even puts in the category of that sex before marriage, or living as if you're married when you're not. Those kinds of categories all come into that. So yes, everything about the consequences that we experience in this life, we can look back and say, well, I didn't follow this basic rule God gave us. That was for our good. Yeah. So anyway, we've gotten kind of off the subject, but I was thinking back then to this favoritism thing you talked about, with the idea that Rachel understood, this is my way of putting it, a translation according to Tonya, I guess. No.
Works.
Rachel understood Jacob. I think Esau was kind of out of her wheelhouse. She just didn't get him. He was so boy.
That makes sense.
And who knows if even Rebecca, good grief. This is going to be how it goes the whole time. Rebecca and Isaac, who knows what their relationship was like. It was somewhat arranged. It does say there was love there. So there was likely a good connection, but so much of the time in marriage, we still don't get the opposite sex real well. We don't exactly understand how they operate and what that, so I have a feeling Rachel couldn't relate to Esau very well. But at one point in the scripture that I was reading, it said Jacob loved Esau. Here we go. Isaac loved Esau, and Rebecca loved Jacob. And I was thinking, yeah, but she's a mom. She loved both of them. She just didn't relate to Esau. That's my thought. I'm like, loving.
That actually brings up an issue in the question of favoritism.
Maybe how.
And so I want to come back to that, and that's our personalities are going to matter, because we don't have a boy and a girl or a boy and a boy like we find in this family unit here. We had a herd, the clan, and so finding for us as a personal family, and you and I trying to deal with favoritism had an interesting way in where that rolled out. So you what was the word you used a minute ago? Personality. Is that what you said? Personality disorder. Because Rebecca is Rachel. Now I can't get the families right. Because Rachel had a personality disorder. That's
Rebecca.
Rebecca.
Right.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to write that down so I don't say it wrong again. This is what's happening in my life. I have to write everything down so I don't forget it. The disposition, a person. It's not just personality. It's more
Role
than that.
and all that. Is that what
Yeah,
you
your
mean?
disposition. Like if you're just a more introverted person, and he was somebody who did things at home, like I said, and his
Jacob,
brother was out.
okay,
And,
yeah,
and
right.
his brother was out. His brother was out doing man things.
Yeah.
And so his dad was probably similar.
That's what I mean, yeah.
You've got that story. So you have in your own family with your children, there are going to be kids that you identify with better. You just kind of
Right, that's
you
what it
get
sounded
them,
like, too.
and because they're like you, they're more like you than other kids are like you, and so that's a recipe for favoritism unintentionally.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think, like we're saying, and if Jacob hung out in the house and he happened to cook with mom, was interested in that, it would be tempting to just get to know him a little better, easier to get to know him.
Yeah, a lot
we can
longer
relate in
conversations.
that. Yeah, we have kids who would hang around with me in the kitchen and do whatever. So I probably talked to them more. Although I think what was good about homeschooling was they had their siblings to relate to, and I had to relate to each one of them in that setting as well. So there wasn't like come home from school and then have to find ways to talk to them. So that was the advantage in that to me of homeschooling. Because I remember Noah's probably one of the ones that were more difficult. He would be a little bit like me, and
He's
if
a
I
lot
was
like,
had
he's
an
a
Esau.
lot like you, but he was a dude.
Well, no, but I'm saying if I had an Esau, that'd probably be the closest because
Oh, yeah?
he was very, very manly and very from day one.
Still
very
alive
much
for the
like
record,
a
so he is
man.
still very
yeah,
manly and
I'm
still-
just saying, growing up, he was very much a boy. So when we would talk about things, it needed to be about what he was experiencing from a boy perspective, which I couldn't always get, but I wanted to. I was interested in it. But yeah, then we had a little bit of the similar outlook personality-wise, so some of that caused some clashes, which is
You
interesting.
did. As a matter of fact, it's kind of interesting because you two could have some really knockdown, drag out fights when you get upset. You get loud with each other, and it was kind of I don't want to say interesting to watch that, but to look back on it because it was awkward to watch it because, but you guys were oftentimes.
He was also a teenager.
But no,
a normal teenager.
obviously, yeah, we were raising, but
Because when he was younger, that wasn't true.
as big an issue when he was younger.
No, because and I always appreciated who my kids were. They each had their own unique things. They had their own talents and gifts, and they were all different. I think Noah kind of felt out of it because he wasn't a music guy like a lot of the kids were. But I always thought he was so funny, and he had such things to give that other kids in our gang didn't. He was a really great swimmer early on, so he helped other kids learn to swim. There was things about him that I really appreciate, but he didn't see what I saw in him. And when he became a teenager, he was fighting his own self so much. Makes me think of where Esau probably was in this story, trying to figure out how to go and do the things that he knows to do, but also what does it mean to be who Dad thinks I am, or who Mom would like me to be, or those kinds of things.
He was one who wanted to do what he wanted to meet expectations. Still does, and he's one that looks at he tries to excel beyond them. So he always found himself a little, I think, disappointed when he didn't
and he
get
thought
there.
we were disappointed in him, and I was never disappointed in him. And I think that's where when you've got these kids like in this story who are trying to figure it out. So Jacob ends up being a deceiver to get what he thought was what he was supposed to do.
Don't forget the Bible starts the story by saying he starts out as a usurper, a deceiver, because he comes out clutching his brother's ankle on their birth date. So he's from the very get go, and there's even the prophecy there. Where are we at here? In excuse me, the birth of the boys, the birth of it. These are the family records. And it says, hang on, the children inside her struggled with each other, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said, "There's 2 nations in your womb, 2 peoples will come from you and be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." So she comes into this relationship knowing that her younger son is going to be the stronger of the 2 of them, even though the older son is the physically stronger.
And an
and they
interesting
come
angle
out.
on this story, because Rebecca thinking that, knowing that, is it possible that she was just trying to bring about that
On
on her own?
I
Yeah.
was going to say. So
He
that was
becomes
my
a
question for
deceiver.
you. If you had a prophecy like that you prayed when you've got some twins going
one of
on,
the-
and you're asking, and the Lord just tells you, well, you got two great things coming out of you. One of them is going to be greater than the other one and I'm thinking that's inevitable. No, there's not parity in anything in this world, but the younger is going to be more strong. How could that impact the way you parent? If you here's a better way of putting this. How do you deal with it if you have two children in this case, and one of them has a particular kind of skill set that's going to make them ruler over the other one? You just see it. Maybe the Lord doesn't even tell you. You just have the ability to go, this kid is so much more advanced in their ability of handling the politics, in navigating relationships in life, and just the social circles, whereas this one's just kind of doing things. Because what do we learn about Esau? Esau gives up his birthright for soup. Stew. I mean, stew may be a little more tempting to do it than soup. But I'd probably give it up for tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich. But
So a little bit swayed by his own tummy.
Yeah, his appetite drove him, whereas as you see in Jacob, a much more calculated individual. And that carries on forward in his life. He is much more calculated. We don't get the story of Esau. We just get Jacob runs away and comes back, and Esau comes to meet him, who's done well in life. He's got a massive horde of followers, two nations, as it were. But anyway,
well, I
21
think
years later.
you do have that, though, because you do see natural bents in kids, and you have to encourage those natural bents. I remember kind of the same, we have a little bit of that in our family where we have Micaiah who kind of took to music pretty easily and quickly. We have the other kids who loved to sing and wanted to be involved, but they weren't necessarily as enthused about maybe an instrument or something. Then we have Aaliyah who took to art pretty easily and quickly. And so we could see these things, and it did maybe highlight who they were going to be. For instance, we knew that Hannah early on would be a leader. She's just naturally got that charisma that people gravitate to her and do what she says. And that's easy to see pretty quickly.
Both to her benefit and her detriment.
Yeah. And then you see the older, in our case, the older son being the stabilizer.
He's a diplomat.
And he brought a lot of, that brought tension in some leadership things, but in a good way. And I think Hannah would look backwards and think, yeah, it's probably good that he was there because I had the maybe forcefulness, but he had the little more, level-headed when it came to dealing with, like when we were gone and they needed to deal with the younger siblings and stuff. So it's interesting because if you can step back from it and you can view these things, then you kind of can guide them, but you're never gonna quite, especially in a bigger family, I think you're never gonna quite give them the exact attention and the perfect amount of lauding or praise, to pull them up to where they ought to be. So that's where I think you just really have to believe that God's separated them out. He's seen them. He's known them since before they were born. The Bible says that he knows them in their womb. So we did also give them names that before they were born, we, tried to sense what God would name them. So I think that plays a part, even though I wouldn't necessarily go into all those specific things, but we have Judah now who lives up to the he has his name be praised and man of God in his name. I believe that's his goals. He doesn't necessarily probably know that about his goals that God would have had for him before he was born, but I believe he's living up to that, to search that out, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then there's Elijah who is a survivor, and God made his name mean to rise up in the desert, that kind of thing. So there's things about them that you see and and you can grasp, but you can't know the full picture. So I think that's what Rebecca tried to do. She knew this prophecy, so she tried
to make it go her own
way. Build that up and make it happen. But probably knowing that Jacob was kind of weak, I imagine he was the second. He wasn't going to automatically have the birthright. He was also kind of a girly boy, it sounds like, because he's hung in the house and did, house chores type thing. So she probably thought, I need to edge him toward that, because he may not just be able to go and conquer it on his own. That's probably not good, but God blessed it.
he's not short of it because his life goes on, he becomes an excellent animal husbandry guy. I mean, but
learns
is
it
shifty.
even.
I mean, basically he's like, okay, so I can have all the spotted ones, and he makes it so all the lambs come out spotted, and I want the ones that aren't spotted. So he makes it. He manipulates the herd. Clearly, where Laban doesn't know that he's doing it. It's just he sees. He does, and actually accuses him later on of stealing everything that he had because he took his daughters and all of his cattle and made him a poor man. And, he's like, no, I was just working in the way in the parameters you gave me to work within. And so he's a little bit shy, still a politician in there too. But, I don't know if girly man, I keep thinking, is girly man the right way to put that? Domesticated, I think is what you're shooting for.
I know. I'm sure there's all kinds of weird names for it these days. I'm just saying, from that perspective, from Isaac's perspective, he wouldn't have been a leader of men or
he wasn't.
Go out and conquer the world.
He was clearly more to be a usurper. I don't know how to better word. There's another word out there for it, to be someone who's.
Well, he was the deceiver. Was also one of his nicknames, wasn't
shifty. To be conniving, to be a plotter, to be that kind of person. Well, yeah, a deceiver is.
Crafty?
Crafty. That's the word. That's a better word. Wait
okay.
Is the kind of person that is that way is someone who is thinking, a thinker more than a doer, is someone who sits back and looks for opportunity to implement strategy. Yeah. Okay? So they're strategic in the way that they do things.
And then there's Esau, who just plunges through
who you
and
say, go take that hill. And Esau's like, give me a gun, let's go. Or an arrow, whatever. And so there's more. He's more. One's more of a leader type. One's more of a follower type. All that to say, nothing apparently, because my brain just went whoop. Just went out there. That these kids are different. There's not necessarily anything that's good or bad about them. Even though to read the story, it kind of feels like one of the kids is worse than the other one. A little bit. But that's what I'm saying about this. There's this. The way we are is just the way we are. There's potential for good in all these kids and all these adults throughout the whole Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob storyline. But all of them are broken and influenced by self-interest because of sin in the world. And God's telling the story about how sin has broken down the world, and yet how he still engages with them where they are. He doesn't tell her when she's got these twins in her womb, that there's going to be two kids, one's good and one's bad. This is one's going to overcome. He tells them just what's going to happen. There's not a moral value ascribed to it.
Yeah.
And so, I think, so we were supposed to be talking about favoritism, and we are kind of, but I think that when it comes to the question of favoritism, I think that's one of the things that parents need to watch out for. The kids are different from one another, not necessarily one's doing
better or worse.
If your child's not like you, they don't have the word I was looking for was temperament. If they don't share the same temperament that you do, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. That means that they're different than you. And they're supposed to be. Just because that child comes from you doesn't mean that they're supposed to be like you. I look at those three boys that our daughter Aaliyah has, Leah and Lathan, and how one of them's almost a carbon copy of his dad. The other one is Aaliyah. All of the parts of Aaliyah that he's a Jacob. He very much is. That's Leo. You just look at that kid and go, he's up to something. He's not what? He just turned 3, and he looks. Every time you look at him, he's got this look in his eyes like there's a plan. You will find out later what's going to happen to you. But he makes me think of Stewie from Family Guy. Just as this, like, I've got this major plan going on there. So anyway. And then you've got Charlie, who's a mystery, but Charlie looks like just a bundle of joy. Everything about that little boy is like fun. Is what, but he also has a curiosity. He's going to be crafty
enough to take advantage of what those boys get in trouble for. That's what it makes like.
Yeah, I feel for them having 3 boys in a row.
I'm a sweet little angel, and then go and get do his own.
They're gonna those boys.
Conniving.
Those are the 2 of our children that can handle all boys in a row. But I think God was, looking back, I think God was very sweet to us to give us a boy and then the girls, just to kind of give us a bit to enjoy that in the midst of our own forming as adults and ministers. And
the boys, when they
not
came
that our
on the
boys,
end,
in case you're listening, not that you were that much more difficult, but
and the boys that came on the end were such a joy, but different. Yeah, just so different. So in their own little world of gifts and talents and stuff. And so. Yeah, what I want to say is I don't know that parents, there are, I'm sure, a few out there that pick favorites, but I think what happens is more that children have these, like we were saying, clashes with their parents. And instead of seeing parents as broken and needy and struggling, just like they are, then instead it's this, you're supposed to be perfect kind of thing. So you look at these parents and they let you down, or they do it wrong, or they don't do what you expected or needed, or, all their needs. And so it ends up being so focused on yourself that you can't even really have a good relationship with your parents if you can't see also that they're human, that they're going to struggle to connect to you, to be who you need them to be. But also it's up to you to come a little bit toward them as well. And I think that's what each of our kids have in their more adulthood have seen. They've come back around, and including Noah, and it's a sweet relationship because he really does appreciate who we are, even if there's never going to be a complete, exact, conversational, whatever, without any confusions, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But there is an understanding. There's a gift, and there's a kindness that goes into trying to understand what your parents have done and given in order for you to thrive, And I think the parents out there, they're called to do their best, and their best would be to give them back to God, because God's the only one that can really know who they are, where they're at, what they need, and can give them the full love and affection that they desire. I read something about this story and how it is as if they're trying to accomplish the things that God has planned and said was going to happen, but on their own. We can't do it on our own. We can't bring the blessing that this child needs, or the thriving that this child needs.
Well, they didn't have a guidebook, not like we have. The Torah,
Mm-hmm.
the Bible, the way, the rule of life, wasn't
It was all
written.
written
There wasn't. It
later,
was
yeah.
all oral tradition. They had what Abraham had.
Right. They had forefathers that walked with God, and that was the closeness that they understood.
And on that note, I think it's
yeah.
important to realize that every one of us grow up with we're talking about influence, and that's what everyone has. We wonder why kids don't, grow up, and some of them don't go back to church. I think we've thrown out the importance of the fact that narrative of the life of Christ in us is lived through our lives. And so what our kids see is as important as what we teach them in Sunday school or whatever else. There's something that they need to look upon their parents and see, because all these guys had was watching mom and dad live out the call that God had placed on their lives.
Understanding of God and the prophet.
And so just a side note on that, I think that's just really, really important to understand. These guys didn't have anything but that imagery. So they blew it just like their parents. As a matter of fact, in all of the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you just see the same sins getting committed in different ways because they learned them from their parents.
Sure they did.
They learned the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of it. And so...
And again,
anyway.
Parents can only just point back to Jesus as the perfection. Parents cannot be perfect for the kids. And then you're right, for the parents to fully take that on. That's still their responsibility to be and do the things that God has called so that their children will know him. But that's about humility and trusting in God. That's not about being the perfect parent. However, love your kids, draw them in, don't push them away, and including their failures, because you've been forgiven as well. So forgive them, and then keep escorting them through the things in life, because they need you. They need the ones who've gone before. We all need that type of encouragement that we can make it, that we can keep going, that we can be forgiven, that we can be loved past our imperfections.
I think a couple things that I want to do. We've been chatting about this for a reasonably decent amount of time, oddly enough. And so I want to kind of wrap it up with a couple of things that were going through my mind as we're talking about, as we've talked about favoritism. Favoritism is a modern term. It's not a term that's applied here in the scriptures. It's not a word that's in the scriptures. But we do see it before. Like I said, we talk about Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. We talk about that we see these that there are favored children that have status that is given to them by their parents. They're at least talked about more.
Yeah, but there's also the story. What went through my mind was the story of the prodigal son, and how the older son was actually there and
the favorite
and
son
close.
should have been the favorite. Yeah.
Well, he was the older son, so in the line of and traditions of this time, he would have been kind of the favorite son. But he's the one that got kind of whiny and said, "Why don't I get anything?" When the younger son rebellion ran off and took whatever inheritance that was supposed to be his part and squandered it, came back and desired to come back just to be a servant under his dad, and then got the affection given back to him.
Right.
It's supposed to be a picture of what a father, a perfect father or a better father does, as he brings that one back in at the same time as the older one's always been there. He said, everything I have is yours. So it's not as if parents, in that scenario, in that story in the Bible, it wasn't a favoring type story. It was a whatever that child needs. Sometimes it's more sacrificial or difficult for a parent. And then on the other hand, sometimes the child misses what the parents have given.
And I think that what as we've talked about, like temperament and how that can impact the way we parent,
operate with,
but maybe unintentionally or unknowingly, a parent can do that. But if we're trying to be intentional about not showing favoritism, what I want to ask is, you said the parable of the prodigal son. If we're going to go all New Testament, let's just throw down. There's also the parable of the talents. God doesn't tell a story about giving equal amount of income or resource to be invested amongst three different servants. There's different amounts entrusted according to the ability of the servant. Mm-hmm. And so the question then there is, does love or does parenting, in this case, equal, I'm going to use a modern term, equity? Everyone's treated exactly the same and we're looking for the exact same outcome, or is it something different?
Yeah. No, I don't think there's any way to do that, and I don't think we should expect that. That's what I was meaning by for the children to see that the parents are also human. They're going to notice and try to encourage. The Bible says, train up a child in the way he should go, or his bent, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Well, each parent can kind of sense, I think, what a child's strengths are, or their bent, as you were, toward some specific gifting or whatever.
Wiring, skill
set. It's not wrong for us to try to angle them that way. Now, there are the parents who maybe one child is a great swimmer and they have now, given lots of money and lots of resources or whatever to try to get that child to the Olympics. The other children in the home might feel a little neglected by that. But I think if you can handle it correctly and the whole family can get behind this person who has been given an extra amount of whatever it is. But I think that's what I was trying to say. It's also a lot of work and it's sacrifice. And yeah, so siblings struggle. I don't know if it's always the parents creating that and if the parents can do anything about that.
Does God love us all the same? I mean, and obviously this is a question that's a loaded question, so just say the answer.
Yes.
Does he loves us as a father loves a child. The love is without end. It's rich. But he gives us different tasks according to or different ways to play the role as our members of his family, according to how we are made. I mean, how we're wired, how we're structured. So there should be an equality or an equity of sense. I'm just using that term because it's the children in your household should all sense that they have great value and worth.
Right.
No That's more right. worthwhile than the other one.
However, as we are human, we see people like Billy Graham or Mother Teresa or whatever. We think maybe God does love them just a little bit more. Not true at all. And the problem is, I'm afraid that's how siblings sometimes view another child. And they would say, well, God's given them an extra amount because he loves them more. No. The Bible says that we're entrusted with what we can handle too, and what we'll handle correctly, maybe.
Right.
So I'm kind of thankful I'm not a missionary in India. I don't know. Would love to be a missionary one day, but I don't know that I could have handled her fame and the pressure of who Mother Teresa ends up being to a lot of people. Same with Billy Graham. He was very faithful with what God gave him and went to town on it. But again, back to the prodigal son. But then there's the rebellious one that's loved more in that story in a perception, because they needed the extra amount of forgiveness and
the result was jealousy
in.
from the older one.
Yeah, who was there and should have felt loved along the way.
That gets to sibling relationships, which is another conversation, almost. I mean,
yeah, but no, I think you're right. The view of that older child, though, was the younger one favored because he was given the ring and he was given the major amount of forgiveness and he was whatever, or what? So the story, when you read it, sounds as if he was less about what the sibling, although that brought to light how he felt. The sibling's behavior and the way he was treated brought to light what was going on inside him, which was a little bit of a hypocrisy of, all this is available to you, but you're not even taking advantage of what you're close to here, and the relationship's still solid, whereas the relationship was broken over here. So there's a lot of just of a mix of each family's going to go through some of these pieces. Can we see the way God sees it? Can we see, like you said, the way God sees us? So do we feel loved just as much without the jealousy of what we see someone else being treated like, right? I don't know about Jacob and Esau. It's not quite clear. Esau was very angry when he gave it all up, birthright first, and was tricked out of what he felt like was his
he didn't like the fact
rightful.
that his brother was always getting the upper hand on him.
Yeah.
And that's because his brother didn't use brute strength to get what he wanted. He used cunning. And so he probably, these are the two recorded instances.
But
they were the most significant moments where Jacob had one over on his brother. But I have a hunch you don't build that kind of rage unless this has been a problem going on in the family over a period of time.
But again, you don't see or hear that he's angry at his dad or his mom, really. He's hurt. Why can't you bless me also, and when he's talking to Isaac. And I was trying to look up the reasons why he wouldn't be able to get that blessing, but there was a specific thing about the way they handled older children and older blessings back then that I'm not quite whole versed on, so I want to approach that. But it sounds as if like it was more that he would be upset at siblings who took that over, because we desire so badly the parents' approval and the parents' uplift. Right. But what I want to say about that is parents do the best they can, but that's not always in their wheelhouse to make that child not feel left out or not favored. That's what I
we have this
about.
ongoing issue in this world called sin, and that's that human beings are self-interested ultimately. Right. And that's not something that just goes away because we do a good job parenting. And I think it's, I've always said that Isaiah 1:2, where God is frustrated and comments, and he said, I've raised these people. I have animals that are more controlled. Why didn't I just,
I raised these children and they rebelled against me.
They rebelled me. And I said, I raised these. So if God struggles being a good parent, and in the sense that he's saying that the humanity is broken such that it doesn't matter how good of a parent you are, and he would be the model perfect parent, kids still rebel.
Yeah.
And so we have to also not kind of shine a flashlight in our own eyes and say, where were you messing up the kid? Because you're not the one that messed up the kid. The kid comes with his own set of quirkiness. And we watched, how many times, our kids, one of them how many times did our girls fight over who one is going to sing the lead? No, I'm going to sing this song. No, it's my turn to sing. Why is she singing? Just when they were little. She's singing and I want to sing it. They fight over the dumbest things when they're little especially. And
well, again,
they want to be
wanting
the other,
parents' approval. However, isn't it funny when you want them to do one thing? Okay, sing this. Now they don't want to do it anymore.
Well, that's the 8-year-old versus the 16-year-old. They change when they become teenagers, and they won't do what you. Okay. They'll all want to do it when they're 8-year-old. None of them want to do it when they're 16 years old. Anyway, I don't know. I think. Yeah. So the message for today, Tonya, as parents, how to not favor your children. How to not show favoritism to your children. If you could sum it up in a sentence, what would you say it is? Or two. I'll give you 2 sentences rather than just one word.
Just lift them up in the things that they are, in the things you see in them, that their needs. That's not easy to love them. Love them where they are. Love them with
You
what
want me to
they have.
Ask it again.
Don't love them based on their performance, but love them just because they're yours, and
Okay.
let them know that.
Follow-up question. As a parent who's raising kids, how should you see yourself in trying to raise them in a way that doesn't show favoritism?
Yeah, there you go. To me, you find your security in the love that God has for you every day. And therefore, you will treat your children as if they are loved that way as well. Because there's not a whole lot of... parents are going to make mistakes. They're going to make one
Indeed.
feel noticed and another one neglected. There's not much way you can do that, but you have to put that in God's hands. There's no way you are going to do that perfectly.
So love them when you're dealing with the kids. The reason I'm bringing this up is in summary is what I would say is what you're saying is show yourself some grace. God gives you grace, and remember that you can only. And what I would add to that is, and remember that you can only give what you've received. So that means that your relationship with Christ is central, because you can't receive comfort to add to your children or grace to add to your children unless you have that relationship. Yeah. So yeah, don't beat yourself up for not being the perfect parent, because you're not the perfect parent. And that's, if you look at the generations we just looked at, right? All three of those generations, every
Just
perfect parent was just the
front.
same as the last parent. We're going to do some things like our parents did. So anyway, hey, this has been a
Crazy.
good ADHD version of the thing about yes, this is great. If you're trying to take notes, what were you thinking? So glad that you joined us here for this episode of Ask
Mom
and Dad. See, we're getting the hang of this after however long we would do it. For that much, guys, listen, as far as I can say, come back again next time. We'll have it next time as soon as we can. Till then, just keep on.
I keep on